Hi, everyone. My name is Bronson Zgeb, and I'm a content developer at Unity. In this talk, I'm going to be talking about why I think that mobile is such a great platform for games, uh, from my perspective, at least, and how Unity can help you take advantage of everything that mobile has to offer. Um, Before we begin, I just want to mention that everything in this talk was learned through either like anecdotal experience from my decade of working in games or from different like articles and that I've read and talks that I've attended or watched online or such. So first, before I begin, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on me. I've been developing games using Unity for about 10 years now. I was inspired to start making games sometime in the around, let's say, 2009-ish, when I read an article on Gamma Sutra that was titled "How to Prototype a Game in Under 7 Days." At that time, I was working as a web developer, and I'd never made a game before, but I was curious. And the article was it was tied to this project known as the Experimental Gameplay Project. Um, and the EGP, I think it's hard to remember at this point, but it had, I think, monthly themes, and they encouraged developers to share one game a month tied to that theme. So it was kind of, as far as I know, at least, an early version of game jams, which became much more popular later on. So anyway, after seeing all the other games released as part of the EGP, I started to get pretty motivated. Seeing so many games made in such a like really short time by a single developer, embracing the inevitability of failure with maybe the remote possibility of making something great was super exciting to me. So with that, I set out to learn how to develop games in Flash, since that's what everybody seemed to be using at the time. After that, I went on and I joined Funcom as an intern gameplay programmer for Anarchy Online. I was there just in time to celebrate their 10th anniversary of the game. But since I'd already been working as a web developer, and a bit as a mobile developer too, it felt kind of like a step backwards for me because I was going back to being an intern. But at the same time, I wanted to get experience working on games in the context of a big company. So it's still interesting. Later, I worked for Concordia University as a games researcher, which eventually led me to co-found a company called Co-op. In the early days of Co-op, we game jammed constantly, and this like allowed us to build our skills while also keeping an eye out for work for hire and other opportunities that we could show our work and just continue to survive, basically. Uh, this eventually led to me working as a contractor for Square Enix Montréal, where we developed the expansion to Lara Croft Go called The Mirror of Spirits. So eventually I got tired of the hustle of running a small indie game studio, and I left Co-op and joined SEM Square Enix Montreal as a full employee working on mobile games. Now this year, I've joined Unity finally as a content developer, where I work on projects to showcase Unity features and build demos to help our users. So why am I telling you all this? Basically, I want to give you an idea of where I'm coming from, since a lot of this talk is about my perspective of the things that I think are really interesting and cool about mobile games. So hopefully it gives you, yeah, a mindset of where I'm coming from. So first, we're going to talk about, I guess, sorry, yeah, we're going to talk about mobile games in from my perspective, coming from this sort of background of rapid game development, prototyping, indie game development, and a little bit of time in, let's say, AAA. And then I want to talk about Unity a little bit and just why it's a good platform to use when developing mobile games. So in the first half, I'm going to sort of give a showcase of an assortment of mobile games, all made with Unity, by the way, through different lenses. In the first example, we're going to talk about what's great about the mobile games audience and the impact that that has on developing mobile games. Then I'm going to talk about professional mobile game development culture and how it kind of differs from PC console game development with examples. After that, I want to talk about what's interesting about the possibility space surrounding mobile games. Finally, we're going to talk about some exciting new like technology that's unique to mobile games and how it's used in developing them. And then to wrap it up, like I said, I'm going to talk a little bit about Unity and just some of the ways that it helps in mobile game development. So let's talk about Pokemon Go. I'm sure everyone here is already familiar, but just in case, Pokemon Go is a mobile game that mixes AR and GPS technology, and it went on to become this huge global phenomenon. At the height of its popularity, you could see groups of hundreds of people all around the world from all walks of life gathering in parks to catch Pokemon together. So Pokemon Go is a really great example of just how wide the mobile audience is. Strangers all around the world connected with each other through this game, this one single game. And to quote Dennis Huang from the development team, he said, "It didn't matter what gender, what class you're from, what ethnicity, or any demographic. Pokemon was this common bond that people were sharing." In the same talk that he said that, he shared that Pokemon Go's traffic after launch was actually 50 times larger than their target, which was 10 times more than their worst case estimate. Now, I'll admit, obviously, Pokemon Go is a bit of a special case, and we can't expect this kind of reach from just all mobile games. But the fact that it was a mobile game is what allowed for it to reach as many people as it did. No other gaming platform has a reach as wide as mobile devices do. So back when I started making Flash games, the biggest draw was how accessible it was. Anybody with a computer and a web browser could access your game. And on top of that, there was a handful of popular websites where people gathered to play the games that would host your game for free. Unfortunately, Flash is dead. I think end of this year, officially completely dead. And the websites where you used to share those games aren't exactly what they used to be. But nowadays, we have another option, maybe a better option, which is mobile games. So, I mean, we all want people to play our games, right? That's why we make them. And one of the great things about mobile is that everybody has a mobile device on them at all times. These devices, they're always on, ready to play at any moment. And mobile devices, like I've said before, have the biggest audience of any gaming platform. So if we really want people to play games, it makes sense to make them for mobile, right? Other platforms, some of them have a high barrier to entry, and like not everybody has access to a desktop computer or gaming consoles, things like that. They're very expensive and not necessarily a priority for people who don't dedicate time and money to gaming, as opposed to mobile devices. Everybody has one. Even if you do own these things, they tend to be a shared resource in the household, so they're not always accessible. So for mobile, everybody has a device and it's available no matter where you are. It doesn't matter if you're sitting on your couch at home, if you're at the office, if you're anywhere in between, your mobile device is there. And to add to that point, people of all tastes and demographics already have a mobile device right now. Even my grandmother owned an iPad, and she used it for two things: reading the news and playing games. So that means that no matter what kind of game you're making, your target audience will have access to it. And let's be honest, people outside your target audience will have access to it too. Everybody has access to it. And now, isn't that kind of a wonderful thing? So by the way, Unity allows you to deploy your game to over 20 different platforms. So if your goal is to reach a lot of different people, then it provides a great solution for that. There's some recent games like Genshin Impact, very popular right now, and The Last Campfire. They took advantage of Unity's multi-platform support, and they were able to launch on multiple platforms, including mobile, from day one. Unity also has a beta program now called the Game Growth Program that's specifically designed to help smaller studios grow their audience. So under the Game Growth Program, Unity's team will use metrics to run user acquisition campaigns for your game and bring in more players. And then after that, they provide you with tools to help drive more engagement. So anyway, let's talk about Supercell. If you don't already know, Supercell is one of the most successful studios in mobile game development right now. They're responsible for titles like Brawl Stars, Clash Royale, Clash of Clans, etc. And Supercell is a studio that really believes in the power of small teams. For them, smaller teams leads to better prioritization and focus, and it creates better quality games. If things aren't working out on a project, usually the first thing they'll do is try to make the team smaller. And the end goal is basically putting together the smallest possible team they can to finish or work on the project. So as a result, there's very little specialization in a team, and everybody ends up working on many different aspects of a game. They also believe in letting teams be in full control of a project. So only the team can decide whether or not a game should be canceled. Now, it's certainly not the case for all mobile studios, but with Supercell being, one of the most successful studios right now, other developers are starting to take notice and learn lessons from their experience. Also, by the way, for reference sake, Supercell's teams are about 2 to 7 people on new games and 10 to 7 people on live games. Let's also talk about Hearthstone. If you're not familiar, Hearthstone is a digital collectible card game developed by Blizzard. It's won multiple awards and generated over $1 billion in revenue for the company. Hearthstone started as a small team whose mission was, I'm going to quote this, to be flexible, be agile, and identify the opportunities that massive lumbering teams cannot and attack them with gusto. So they wanted to return to what they call the old garage programmer days, where developers had to wear a lot of different hats, but achieve something that lived up to their Blizzard's high standards. And if that's not enough, the team actually shrank even more after some kind of temporary dissolution until it was down to just 2 people. And these 2 designed the game essentially entirely on paper, which allowed them to quickly work through all the problems and figure out what worked and what didn't work. And then later, when the prototype was finished, they scaled back up and made the game as you know it today. So in the early days, Team 5, that's what they call the Hearthstone team, was composed of 15 people. And nowadays, it's a bit bigger. It's grown to about 70 people. So why am I telling you about this? Well, I wanted to highlight some of the differences between mobile development and AAA PC console development. So maybe you're a AAA PC console developer and you feel like your work doesn't have a big impact on the final product. The development teams are often so large that a lot of individuals end up only touching just a tiny little part of the game, whatever tiny part their team is responsible for. And I guess thanks to my beginnings in rapid prototyping and then later my experience as an indie game developer, I got used to working alone a lot or on very small teams while wearing a lot of different hats. And I think, honestly, this is super valuable because not only does it make you more resourceful, but it also allows you to see the forest from the trees. And by that, I mean, I'm used to viewing projects as a sort of cohesive whole rather than just the little individual parts that make it up. And I think ultimately this leads to better quality games, which has now been reset, let's say, by Supercell. Decisions come easier also when you take into account the project as a whole, and you don't get bogged down in little unnecessary details, because it gives you more of sort of a guiding light where you say, this may not be the best for this small portion of the game, but it's best for the entire project. So from that point of view, I prefer working in mobile development because those teams tend to be smaller than their PC console counterparts. And as a result, your work has a bigger impact too. So on that same note, the large AAA development teams can sometimes move very slowly. Every decision has so many different stakeholders and has to go through so many different people before they finally can reach a decision. So as a result, things can take a long time. The smaller mobile development teams are much more nimble. Less people means less stakeholders, communication is faster, and it also allows a lot more room that way for iteration and experimentation. And as I'm sure you can guess, one of the core principles of rapid prototyping is experimentation and failing fast. The whole idea is to try things, fail fast, learn from your failures, and then move on to the next experiment. Which, coming from a computer science degree where I was taught, start every project by building a UML diagram to map out the relationships between all your different classes before you write any code, which, by the way, is an insane way to work. That never worked for me. I found this way of approaching my problems super liberating. So rather than try to guess what my software is going to look like up front, which kind of usually leads to over-engineering, I iterate, experiment, and refactor as I go until I'm finally happy with the result. Yeah, all this just to say that I'm happier working on a small, nimble team, and that's why mobile development appeals to me. And can I just add that I know small teams exist in the PC console space too. I worked in one. But I think they're less common as far as, I've seen, especially in AAA. Also, the development cycles in AAA PC console space tend to be really long. It can be super exhausting. It leads to developers losing motivation, usually burning out by the time their game reaches the market. The mobile development cycles tend to be a lot shorter. Sometimes it's because mobile games aren't as big, but another reason is also because soft launch is super common on mobile. If you're not familiar, soft launch is a preview release of your game. So it's a way to put out the game before it's entirely finished. Usually the availability is locked to certain regions. So it's basically just a beta launch. And the reason we do it in mobile games is so that we can iterate on the game with a live player base and improve it until it's ready for a worldwide launch. So it's a really rewarding time because you can directly measure the effect of your work with actual players and get feedback. By the way, Unity has solutions to help you during soft launch or during your testing periods. There's Unity Analytics that can help you gather data about your players and how they're progressing through your game. And then using that information, you can tweak and iterate on your gameplay. And you can even make those changes live using Unity's remote config. So let's talk about Hitman Go. Hitman Go was developed in about a year with a development team of around 4 to 12 people. It went on to receive multiple awards and nominations and basically put Square Enix Montréal on the map. But we've already talked about small teams and short dev cycles, so I'm going to talk about something else. Hitman Go was a game designed around constraints. The studio was originally mandated with making the next AAA Hitman game. But for one reason or another, it didn't quite work out as planned. So instead, the studio set their sights on mobile game development, with Hitman Go being their first title. So being their first foray into mobile games, they had to adapt to all the constraints of the mobile platform, in addition to also the constraints of brand, budget, time, etc., all the things that come with that. So where am I going with this? Basically, Hitman Go became a success largely because the developers embraced constraints. In the postmortem, Dan Lutz admits, initially they thought that mobile was just a dumbed down version of what they were already doing, making AAA games. But over time, they learned that mobile brought this whole new possibility space that was different than the one that they were used to working in. So in other words, they realized they couldn't just make Hitman on a small screen with some virtual joysticks because it didn't make sense on the platform. players who wanted the full third-person Hitman experience were already playing that on their console or PC or whatever. They're not really looking to do that on mobile, and the rest of the mobile audience isn't really looking for that kind of experience, so it didn't make sense. Also, similar principles applied to Lara Croft Go, which was the successor to Hitman Go. So, all this to say that mobile game development comes with a unique set of constraints, which can, kind of manifest itself as like exciting new challenges. And if you're a developer who loves to work on hard problems or new challenges, you may want to consider mobile games. So hopefully it probably won't come as a surprise to hear that constraints have actually been shown to make us more creative. When you're working on rapid prototypes, whether it's in a game jam or otherwise, it's common to place some kind of arbitrary constraints just to get the ball rolling, get some ideas flowing. And the big reason that this works so well is because without anything to constrain you, there are just too many possible paths that you can take at any given moment. It's just like too much information for one person to really reason about. So when you apply constraints, each constraint represents a choice that can't be changed, and it closes the doors on possibilities that you no longer even have to consider anymore. So the more you do this, the more you whittle down your options, which then makes fewer possible decisions, and it makes it easier to make decisions afterwards. On mobile, there's really two categories of constraints that I want to talk about: technical and design. So technically, mobile platforms are more constraints, but that doesn't usually mean the games are less ambitious necessarily. So replicating a console quality on mobile is like a very interesting challenge, I think. Developers have to find fun and interesting ways, I guess, to squeeze every ounce of performance out of their games. Personally, as a technical artist, I find this one of the most interesting aspects of mobile game development, because coming up with like clever ways to achieve super high quality visuals and then watching your game suddenly jump to 60 FPS is extremely satisfying. Yeah, although I find this a very particularly fun challenge, I don't really have a lot more to say on the topic without getting into very specific optimization details. So let's talk about design. From a design perspective, mobile, very interesting. As obviously, I'm sure you know, the way we interact with the mobile device is fundamentally very different from the way we interact with a PC or a console. Although I think these days all platforms support controllers, mobile games have to at least work with a touchscreen first and foremost. And really, if you want to capture the biggest audience possible, you should focus on that. So that means if you're not already making mobile games, you're in for an entirely new set of creative challenges working in these constraints. And hopefully that alone might be enough to get some of you designers excited. Touch controls are interesting because they add this level of like tactility and directness that we didn't have before. Most of our input devices have one or two levels of indirection, but touch allows us to almost directly poke at the objects in our game. And there's the addition of some like intuitive gestures like pinching and stretching and scrolling. And then on top of that, there's also the extra constraint of thinking about how do you make your thing work on a smaller screen size, which has its own challenges to think about for sure. So what if you're a developer who loves to work with new technology? Mobile has a lot of exciting new technology. Mobile devices are one of the few consumer devices that have access to AR technology. And AR has tons of untapped potential when it comes to games. Pokemon Go was able to merge AR with GPS and go on to become a worldwide phenomenon. Now, I'll admit that the AR features of Pokemon Go were kind of gimmicky, but I think that as more devices support AR, the opportunity the opportunity to make something that takes advantage and becomes completely reliant on AR unless gimmicky grows. Yeah, so now I know this next part kind of undercuts my point about mobile's accessibility, but previously with Samsung's Gear VR, which I know has been discontinued this year, but it still exists out there, you're able to build VR games using mobile devices as well. And also, there's the Oculus Quest, which is not too different from an Android phone, and you can develop for it using Unity, using the XR plugin for Android. So if accessibility is less of a concern and you're just excited to work with VR, then I think mobile is also a great platform for doing that. On top of that, I think we've barely scratched the surface when it comes to mixing AR with machine learning. I'm sure we've all seen apps that are able to detect objects, and Apple's been promoting this tech for years on stage at WWDC, encouraging more and more people to take advantage of it. And I'm certain there are new forms of interactions that we could develop using these new technologies that just haven't been tried yet. So, by the way, Unity has AR Foundation, which allows you to add AR support to your mobile game, whether it's on iOS or Android. And then Unity supports native plugins, which you could use to then hook up your app to Apple's Core ML or Google's ML Kit to do machine learning. So I guess story time. Some years ago, I worked on this game called Nog. Originally, we developed the game for PS4, and later we ported it over to iOS, PC, other things, VR, stuff like that. So the game was built in Unity, and it released on iOS right around the time that Apple announced that they were going to do AR. And then thanks to a bunch of support from Unity engineers and Apple engineers, I was able to add AR support to my game in no time. So then we had this exciting new challenge with the time we had left of exploring what was possible under this novel new AR paradigm. Since then, I know a lot of new strides have been made in AR technology, and things that I haven't had a chance to play with, let's say. But I just wanted to point out and say how exciting it is to work with brand new technology like this, and reiterate that right now is a really great time to be exploring what's possible with AR, because there's so much untapped potential. So now I'm just going to talk a little bit about Unity. I'm sure you're all aware, but Unity is a game engine. And it's not just any game engine. I'm just going to forgive this next plug that I pulled from our marketing. Unity is the world's leading platform for creating and operating interactive real-time 3D content. What does this mean? It means that Unity's capabilities go far beyond just mobile game development, but I'm not going to talk about that because that's not the focus of this talk. The sort of one of the Unity mottos, I guess, is at Unity, we believe that the world is a better place with more creators in it. So with the goal of bringing more creators into the world, the aim is generally to what they call democratize, among other things, game development. So what this means, what I'm getting at, is that Unity tries to provide solutions to problems that could previously only be solved by those with sufficient resources. To be blunt, Unity makes inaccessible things more accessible for creators. Also, by the way, 53% of the top 1,000, of the 1,000 top grossing mobile games are made with Unity. So the only reason I'm bringing all this up is to let you know that Unity is very mobile focused. Most of Unity's customer base are mobile developers. And what I'm getting at is really just, if you're looking to make mobile games, you're in good hands with Unity, because there's a lot of other developers using it specifically for mobile. Unity's focused on mobile because so many of its customers are mobile. And yeah, And now I'm going to talk about some of the solutions that they have to help you out. So these are some of the things that I mentioned in the talk and some things I didn't. Um, Before I get into it, I just want to point out I'm not a business intelligence person, a BI. So if you are interested in these things, I recommend that you seek out more information either on the website or not from me, because I probably can't help. Maybe I can point you in the right direction. So in order to help grow your audience, Unity has their acquire and game growth services. Unity Acquire is kind of a series of tools to help you gain insights about your players and help you sort of grow your player base. It's sort of a self-service bunch of tools that you would probably hand off to a BI person to make sense of. The Game Growth Program, however, like I mentioned, is a program to help you acquire more users and grow your audience with help from Unity. It's currently in early access, so you have to apply to join. But under this program, Unity's intelligence team will support you by providing you with insight and funding for user acquisition. So basically, the idea is to allow you to grow your audience while still remaining independent. You don't have to work with a publisher or someone to basically front all the cash to do user acquisition. For monetization, Unity has the Unity Ads SDK, which not only helps you serve ads, but it hooks up with their monetization dashboard, which is full of all kinds of good data for people who love data. They also have their own analytics SDK, which connects to an analytics dashboard. And then something I find particularly interesting, as more in the gameplay side, is their remote config tool that allows you to sort of tune your game live without having to make new builds. Now, yeah, then the last thing is Unity exports to, like I said, 20 different platforms without too much of a fuss, and it has cross-platform support for AR and VR. Uh-oh, is my camera dead? I'm just going to quickly wrap up. I think my camera's dead. Okay, so wrap up. I think mobile is a great platform because mobile's accessible, and accessibility is a wonderful thing that I believe everyone should strive for. Mobile teams are generally smaller and more nimble, which is a more fun way to work. Mobile's a new possibility space. It's one of the newest gaming platforms and also has new technology being developed for it all the time. And that makes for a lot of novel and interesting things to explore. And finally, it's a great platform for mobile. Unity is a great platform for mobile because it has everything you need built in. And not to mention, a lot of mobile games are already built using Unity. So being part of that ecosystem makes it relatively easy to get help from other users or resources. So finally, if you want to learn more about Unity's mobile solutions, you can find them at this link, along with a bunch of the sources that I used to craft this talk. I'm going to be around for a Q&A about 5 minutes after this talk ends. So in about 5 minutes in the Square Enix kiosk. And you can also find me on Twitter at Zgeb. Thanks, everyone.